Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Today is Agriculture Day 6. It's essentially going to be the last day for agriculture. I'll be posting another assignment, most likely on Wednesday, for you guys to get done as kind of a cap off of this one. And that will be on Google Classroom. So once again, here we are still in COVID-19 mode. And give me 1 second because I've already finished the Nearpods for the day. I'll go ahead and post those up. 1 second. Let me go to nearpod.com. Let's go student paste. Change the date. It's going to go to the end of May. Apply. Let's go to link. Copy. For the version in Spanish, use this link. All right. And let me get my English one up. Student paste. Apply. Google Classroom. Okay, that's done. All right, I've got the version where you can go through by yourselves on Google Classroom. As for everyone else, if you wish to go ahead and join me, I'm going to do this live. And here is the link to the live Nearpod. So you can click that one and go through the Nearpod with me as I go through from each scene. Today's is going to be dealing with sustainability. So we're going to be looking at how farms, how agriculture can actually break away from the big agribusiness methods. What are the criticisms of big agribusiness? As well as looking to see how people are moving to a more sustainable type of development. All that's going to be today. There are going to be a couple of videos, and you guys are going to watch the video clips and be able to write a response at the end of them. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and go forward. Nearpod. So first things first, your bell ringer on here. I'm asking you, imagine you're a farmer or you have some other work in agriculture. What are the things you could do that would actually actively help the environment? Is there anything you could do to help the environment? Go ahead and think about it for a second or two and come up with a couple of answers. I'm seeing that no one is logged into the Nearpod right now. Okay, waiting for people to log in. So I'm going to go ahead and put a timer. Oh, I got 2 people. No, wait. Nope. Sorry. I thought I had 2 people. I was excited there for a second. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and put 2 minutes on the board. As soon as my board comes up. All right. So 2 minutes go now. And then we're going to finish this off. Okay, well, still I've got no one logged into the Nearpod using that link I posted. So I'm just going to go ahead and move forward. Oh, well. All right. So let's go ahead and move forward to our next scene. So what are some things you could do as a farmer to help the environment? And by the end of today, you should be able to have a cohesive answer to this one. Exactly what does it mean to be sustainable? What does it mean to help the environment if you're in a farming field? So, our objective, you're going to be able to address the paradox of big agribusiness and sustainability. For those of you who do not know what a paradox is, pull it up on here. I can explain it to you, but I'd rather get it's an absurd or self-contradictory statement. In other words, how does agribusiness go against the tenets of sustainability? And our question is, can agribusiness be sustainable? If so, how? All right, let's go ahead and move forward to the next one. So, to be totally useless but interesting. When Woodrow Wilson was president from 1913 to 1921, the First Lady, Edith Wilson, actually had a flock of sheep that would graze on the White House lawn. And the reason being is because, well, they didn't have, this is back in over 100 years ago, almost 100 years ago, they did not have lawnmowers the way we do now. So for her to keep the White House lawn clear and trimmed, they had a flock of sheep that would actually go out there and eat the White House grass. So our question is, what can this teach us about sustainability? How is this a sustainable practice? You have these sheep munching on the White House lawn. What are they doing? Aside from keeping the grass short. Well, they're also fertilizing it because sheep, let's face it, sheep are going to do what sheep do. Food goes in one end and eventually it comes out the other. And that poop, manure, actually helps to fertilize the grass and keeps it looking really, really good. So this was a very, very forward-thinking thing. It was a necessity. But what happens now is there are actually companies like lawn care companies that will actually bring sheep to your house, and they will let the sheep graze in your yard for an hour or two to cut down the grass. And also, it fertilizes the grass. So it's their way of actually doing yard work without having to use gasoline. They're not using machines. They're not having to pollute anything. At the same time, they're also not bringing in any of these fertilizers, chemical fertilizers and such. The sheep do all the work for them. They eat, they cut it down, then they fertilize it. So today, once again, sustainable agriculture and agribusiness. Can they ever come one to the other? Some people would say yes, others say no. We're going to try to find some middle ground here. So our first question is, what is sustainability? So on this one, this is slide 7. Sustainable agriculture is any agriculture that actively works to not just preserve, but also enhance the environment. So those sheep on the White House lawn, that was sustainability. You're doing some agricultural work there, maintaining the landscape, but at the same time, you're fertilizing it and you're not using any of these chemicals. You're not using any machines. Makes it a lot more sustainable than normal. Oop, skip one there. So here's one of our first ways we can be sustainable. It's called ridge tillage. A farmer plants crops on the tops of ridges that he cuts into the land. By using ridge tillage, you can actually lower the cost of production. You're not having to deal as much when it comes um, to weeding and such. Essentially, you cut over these ridges, and then once you're go pick your harvest your, whether it's tomatoes, cucumbers, what have you, you go back over it again and cut everything down. The plants that you cut fall down into the rows, and those actually end up being used as fertilizer. They compost down, they break down and rot in the soil, and that actually feeds other plants, makes it a little bit more fertile. So you can lower that cost of production and prevent the soil you're working on from eroding away. So here's a quick video showing sensitive land management. Go ahead and click start. And yes, I embedded the video into it.
My name is Chuck Moeller. I'm a researcher at Cornell University in the Department of Crop and Soil Sciences. I'm working on an organic cropping systems project funded by USDA. This is a ridge till system for vegetables we're trying to develop. These ridges were originally built 2 years ago. Since then, they've been scraped down and reformed several times, but the idea is that we keep the wheel traffic in the same lanes all the time, and that allows the bases of the ridges to develop good soil structure by earthworm channels and dead root channels. That improves the ability of the crop to root and improves disease management. It doesn't look like much now, but 3 weeks ago in mid-June, these ridges had vetch about that high all over them. We flail mowed the vetch. About a week later, came through and scraped off the tops. That mixed the soil in with the vetch a little bit, helped speed up the decomposition. A week after that, the ridges were reformed. We're now ready to scrape the ridges again and plant cabbage. The reason we scrape and reform the ridges is to get the vetch incorporated so that it can decompose, and also to maintain good weed management so that the weeds are relatively under control. This is our ridge scraper. It's made by Suckup. They don't make them anymore, but it's fairly simple design. There's these canted wheels, keep the scraper on the ridge. Then we've got a double coulter here that cuts through any residue. And finally, this snowplow arrangement scrapes the soil off to the side. The parallel linkage here holds the implement at a constant depth. The adjustment is up here in front. You can adjust it up and down by setting these 4 bolts into different holes. The goal is to scrape about 2 to 3 inches off the top of the ridge.
All right, so that was ridge tillage. Farmer plants these crops on the tops of these ridges in the land, and he's constantly going through there and retilling it and creating new ridges. What happens is all the roots and such and all the plants he cuts down to put into those ridges, they break down, they rot. And while that plant matter is rotting, it's essentially compost. And that is putting nutrients back into the soil. So our next one. So some other things you can do for sensitive land management, ridge tilling is one. Less irrigation is a second one. Find ways to water your land less. To keep it ready for agriculture. You're not doing this as much. So instead of running hoses and water sprinklers out there, you're going to be trying to conserve your water. not use as much water to grow a crop. Some ways to do this one of my favorites is rain harvesting. You'll probably see some people in your neighborhoods, especially with people with backyard gardens. They will actually have a into those rain barrels. And then what they do from there is they will actually use that water later on in their soil system. Another way to do this would be leaching. People who live in the country have septic tanks. What septic tanks do, whenever you take a shower, flush a toilet, put anything down the garbage disposal, those septic tanks will help break down all that waste. And essentially, what it does is you keep it treated with a few enzymes every month, and the water that those septic tanks produce actually gets pushed back out into, usually around Livingston Parish at least, into ditches. I don't want to play with ditch water because ditch water is typically going to be what someone flushed maybe a few days ago. But what other people do is they will actually put a leaching system from their septic tank that goes throughout their yard. That way, when the septic tank pumps out all this excess water, that water will go through the gardens and such, and it actually works to nourish the plants. Not something I do personally. We don't do it at the farm here. We just use our regular ditch system. However, it is something that has caught a lot of people's attention, and a lot of people are doing that now. I'm not one of them, though. You can also dig trenches. This is one of the big ones here that we use a lot because we get a lot of rain, especially in the winter months, January and February. We dig a lot of trenches. And that way, when you dig those trenches, essentially big ditches for irrigation, what happens is excess groundwater comes out and pools into those ditches. And then it can either evaporate from there, or it can actually be used to go in. You can actually channel these ditches into your ridge system so that it's providing that excess groundwater to those plants and keeps them growing. Another way you can actually manage your land a little bit better is to not have any double cropping. Essentially, limit the amount of double cropping you do. Only harvest your crop once a year. And even then, do not use the same piece of land for two different crops in the same year. The best way to do this is crop rotation, because as you're moving your crops from one place to another, you are actually able to, I'm getting a phone call. I don't know who that is. You're actually able to have one part of your field that's not planted, and therefore it can go ahead and start, regrowing its nutrients year after year, or during that year at least. And then the next year you'll plant on that one and leave another section empty. Okay. All right. Another way, limit your usage of chemicals. Farmers have actually been turning against chemical pesticides. You can use genetically modified crops, or you can buy predator insects that will actually eat insects that are harmful to the environment. Case in point, ladybugs. You're seeing on the screen here, there's a that GIF image of a ladybug eating another animal, another bug. Ladybugs are actually really big business for a lot of farmers. In fact, there is that thing at harmonyfarm.com, ladybugs half pints. If you copy and paste that into your browser, you're going to see that this is a website where farmers can actually buy ladybugs. You can actually they're kind of expensive, about $55 total for everything to have them shipped to you. $18 for the ladybugs and $35 for shipping. But this is 1 pound of ladybugs. So I don't know how many that would actually be, but a pound, that's a pretty good number. Ladybugs don't really, don't really weigh that much. So $55, you can get a pound of ladybugs and go dump into your garden or to your farm. And with that, those ladybugs will actually kind of patrol the farm and they'll start hunting there. And they will kill and eat any other bugs that would be harmful to your crops. Another way to prevent the use of chemicals is not to use chemical herbicides, stuff like Roundup. It is a chemical. It actually is used to kill. I put kill crops on here. That should be kill weeds. Oops, I'm sorry. Farmers will actually weed their fields. Instead of using Roundup or other chemicals, they'll go through by either hand or by machine and actually go ahead and start pulling up those weeds. So not a bad way of doing things. If you have a dog that's smart enough to ride a lawnmower, then hey, maybe you can train the dog to cut the grass for you. Our third way is integrated crops and livestock. Instead of using chemicals to fertilize your fields, your farmers are going to use organic means. They could compost, which is using rotting plants like compost piles to fertilize their soil, or they can use manure, also known as poop. They'll let their animals into these areas. The animals will eat certain plants, and then they do their business right there on the ground. And as my goat says, don't mind me, I'm just fertilizing the ground. And yeah, goats don't really care where they drop. They just go around eating in one end, pooping out the other, and they're happy. Strangely enough, goats are actually one of the more clean types of farm animals, especially Nubian goats, dairy goats. They are very clean. The only time they ever get really nasty is when it's mating season. And you have your big bucks will actually start getting really musky and start producing oil on their different glands on their heads. And then they will rub that oil onto everything that they got. Maybe it's a wood fence, maybe it's the side of their barn, but they start rubbing that musk oil to mark their territory. But beyond that, typically these animals are really clean. So obviously sustainable is the best option. So with this one, you're going to have 3 minutes. What are some ways that governments can encourage or pressure large farmers to actually be more sustainable, especially in developing countries? How can the government come out and say, hey, you need to be more sustainable? Here's what we're going to do for you. What's the incentive there? So here's our issue, though, with sustainability. The problem is it's got a couple drawbacks. Sustainability tends to be a bit on the expensive side. It costs more to be sustainable than it does to just produce cows, to produce any type of product using, big agribusiness. And because you're using fewer chemicals and fewer other different processes, you are actually going to be producing a little less food than agribusiness can. Now, one of the biggest complaints with agribusiness is called concentrated animal feeding operations, CAFOs. Also known, excuse me. Yeah, sorry. So the animals are kept on these feedlots, and they're kept in these little pens or small pens. They're not allowed to really get around and roam the way they're used to. And they're essentially just provided food 24/7. They're fattened up until they weigh enough that they can take them to the slaughterhouse. Needless to say, you can probably think of some of the problems with this one because there are a lot of complaints. So, real quick, think about some of the problems people would have with these CAFOs and feedlots. What do you think would be some of these big criticisms? Tell you what, I'm going to give you 3 minutes to get this done. I'm going to go blow my nose and be right back. All right, let's go forward. So, some criticisms of CAFO include poor quality of life for animals. These animals are put so close together that it's easy for diseases to spread throughout their population. We have mass-produced feed can include impurities that can go to all the animals. This is where we get things like mad cow disease because their feed is tainted. They're having these mental breakdowns and such from there. And the animals are kept so close together that if there's a disease that breaks out, one animal gets a disease, it quickly spreads throughout the entire population. On the screen, you're seeing two different pictures of two different areas, two different beef productions. One is feedlot cows, And the other one is pastured cows. Which one do you think you'd prefer your meat from? The feedlot or the pasture? I can say from years of raising cows with my family's farm is that I would always go with pasture, grass fed. Whenever you see grass fed beef or certified organic at the grocery store, those are going to be from meat from cows and other animals that are kept on this pasture system. They're not locked up in these small feedlots and just fed until they're fat. Agribusiness, vertical integration. You're going to need to know this for your U.S. history class, whether you have Mr. Waldrop or Reminique. You're going to need to know what vertical integration is. So for us in agriculture, it's whenever an agribusiness decides to control several steps in the production and distribution of their products, they essentially create a monopoly. So what you're seeing here is a chart of vertical integration in grain-fed beef production. You've got the banks that provide loans. Then you're going to have the industrial inputs, such as seeds, sprays, fertilizers. Because, hey, you know what? You have to create those grains to feed those cows. From there, it breaks off into grain farming to produce food, and in calf production to actually produce the beef animals. Then you've got trucking. Grain and cows both go into trucking. And they both go to the feedlots. After that, you need to have another truck. Once they're fattened and ready to be slaughtered, you put them on another another truck, and you take them to the processing plant, manufacturing plant. Essentially the slaughterhouse. And after the slaughterhouse, the meat goes to either markets or to restaurants. So with vertical integration, you're seeing that companies can control multiple parts of these areas. They might not control the markets or the restaurants, but they will control the calf production, the grain farming. They'll control the trucking. They'll control the feedlots. And all that goes together. I'm going to fuzz on my tongue. All that goes together to actually to put this meat onto a plate, onto your dinner table. So another way, what are the only things here on this table that we typically think of as farming? This activity, once you pull it up for yourselves, I'm seeing no one's on here just yet, you will be able to go through it and try to think about what we typically think of as being farming. Because a lot of the stuff on here, we don't really think about being a farming method. I mean, how many people think of trucking as part of farming? Not that many. All right, so here's why developed countries move to more intensive agriculture. One, it's more efficient at producing food. So because we have a large population in these developed countries, we need more food to keep that population steady, to keep it growing or to keep it steady where it is. Now, because of this, unfortunately, one of the problems with developed countries is we have less farmland. Population typically shifts away from rural farming areas to these big urban cities. And as a result, there are fewer farmers in the world. In fact, the United States has maybe between 5 to 10 farmers per square mile of agricultural land. We're not really high in the list when it comes to agriculture. Now, to step up in these places, we have big corporations, people like Monsanto, as well as other different groups come up and they can make more money because there's a demand for it, but they're essentially replacing the smaller family-run farms. And what you're seeing here is a chicken feedlot. The chicken you buy at the store, maybe a pack of Tyson chicken, that's where the chicken's coming from. You can see there's these like tubes here in the center. Those are water tubes. And the chickens are trained so they can actually go up and they pick on those little red nubs, and that gives them water. You can actually buy those little red nubs at Tractor Supply. They're called water nipples. Terrible name for it, but that's what they're called. I thought they should totally call them chicken nipples, but hey, that's just me being weird. But this is how they're typically grown. There's not a lot of free ranging, which is something I'm a big proponent of. In fact, our chickens here at 3 o'clock every day, they actually have a mechanical door that's actually got a timer on it. 3 o'clock, the door opens, and the chickens are allowed to get out of their pens and run around the yard. So yard birds, and naturally those yard birds create yard eggs. They go into a lot of different places, such as gardens and such, and they go through there looking for bugs, crawfish, anything they can get. They're foragers. They also eat some of the plants out there. So here's the problem, though. There are some consequences that come with this. For one, the disappearance of family farms. I live near a place called Spiller's Ranch. In fact, if you look up this on Google Maps, there's Spiller's Ranch Road in Denham Springs. The Spiller family used to own a dairy back there. That's how Spiller's Ranch Road got its name. But when Mr. Spiller passed away back in the early 80s, not too long after I was born, his sons decided that they didn't want to keep running the business. So they ended up closing the farm, the dairy farm, and they ended up selling the land. And they were able to make a little bit more money that way without doing a lot of the work. So now Spiller's Ranch Road has a lot of housing back there. But, 40 years ago, back in the 1970s and early 1980s, it was an actual dairy farm. In fact, my father used to work for it. And Spiller's, even though it was a dairy farm, they were actually contracted with Kleinpeter. So when they milked their cows, they would actually have the Kleinpeter truck come out, and the Kleinpeter would buy the milk from them. And then they would take it to their Kleinpeter processing plant in Baton Rouge. They'd pasteurize it, they would bottle it, and they would sell it. But unfortunately, the Spiller's story is no longer there. Because they decided to get out of the business. As these family farms are dying and moving away, we have big companies taking control of agriculture. People like Monsanto. And because of that, we actually get more money invested into those areas. Major corporations can gain what's called government subsidies, or essentially government money to do further research and produce more things. Corporations can also get away with very little oversight and essentially establish a monopoly. And that's why I've got this picture of a cow with a barcode on it. Because essentially, these big corporations, they've got enough money that they can have all these different wheels and all these integrated vertical integration in their system. And from there, they're actually able to control a lot more of agriculture than regular mom and pop farms. And now, over the past 20, 30 years, there's actually been a bit of a backlash against big agribusiness. We've actually seen farmers, small family farmers, actually going themselves and trying to work against this. One of the things they do is forming farmers cooperatives. These co-op growers band together and they'll pool their resources to help each other out. So they'll come up with a game plan as to how they're going to be moving their product in the future. how they're going to be rotating their crops, how they're going to be feeding their animals, what they're going to be doing to help each other out. We also see the rise of farmers markets. Instead of going to grocery stores, people will buy fresh food straight from the farmers. Here in Baton Rouge, I've got a picture of it on there. In Baton Rouge, we have the Red Stick Farmers Markets. People growing these crops, whether it's strawberries, broccoli, lettuce, they're actually able to sell them to the community directly. And a lot of people are big into that one because they like seeing where their food comes from. We also have the local food movement, which is part of the farmers markets. People decide to buy local to support their local economy. And lastly, we have the fair trade movement. This is to help promote the higher wages to farmers and food exporters, especially in these developing countries. Farmers or plantations who are producing chocolates or, say, coffee, there's actually a big push to do fair trade with those to make sure that the people who are growing this coffee is actually getting paid a decent wage and not just essentially being kept as slaves. So higher wages for farmers and food exporters in those developing countries. So on the next few slides, you're going to watch a number of videos. As each video plays, what you're going to be doing is writing down any thoughts you have about the video on a free response form. So we're going to be sharing these thoughts and discussing them with our peers. I was hoping to do that. Apparently, I've got no one logged in right now. But the first one is called the Meatrix. Well, no, I'm sorry, Smithfield Farms. So they provide pork products from sausages to bacon. You see Smithfield in a lot of areas in your grocery store.
As part of the Smithfield Foods family of companies, Murphy Brown is responsible for raising hogs safely and humanely. We believe that producing good food responsibly starts on the farm. It's a commitment we honor throughout each stage in the development of our animals. We respond to their changing needs by caring for them in specialized environments in each stage of their lives. Let us show you how we do it. The well-being of our animals is our top priority, and it begins with care for our pregnant sows. Murphy Brown is in the process of converting from individual gestation stalls to group sow housing. Although one system hasn't been proven to be advantageous over the other, Murphy Brown is converting in response to customer requests. No matter which system is used, we have a responsibility to animal welfare. 2 days before giving birth, we move our pregnant sows from the gestation barn to the farrowing barn. This is where the birthing process and the first few days of new piglets' lives take place. Each stall is designed for easy access to food and water for the sow, and ample room to run around for the piglets. The stalls also help facilitate birth, keep the sows comfortable, and protect the newborns from being crushed accidentally by the sows. The first milk piglets receive from their mother is called colostrum, and it contains natural antibodies and nutrients that newborns need to give them a healthy start. Their tails are also docked to prevent injury later in life. Males are also castrated at this time to prevent sexual maturity, which would alter the taste of the pork. All piglets also receive an iron shot to boost their immune system during their first week. Young pigs grow fast. 3 weeks after birth, they weigh in at 10 to 12 pounds. It's time to be weaned from their mothers and to move on to the nursery barn. Before a group of piglets arrive, their nursery is thoroughly washed and sanitized. Nursery workers use simple noisemakers to move piglets into their pens without physical contact or other stressful techniques. A nursery barn is designed to house approximately 40 to 45 piglets per pen for the duration of their stay. In the Murphy Brown system, nurseries are typically owned and operated by independent farmers and their families. We call this arrangement contract growing. In contract growing, Murphy Brown supplies the animals, feed, transportation, veterinary services, and record keeping. Our contract growers provide the modern facilities, day-to-day management, and general upkeep of the farm. Murphy Brown takes the market risk, and the contract grower receives a predictable income stream. regardless of market conditions. During their 50-day stay at the nursery, piglets grow from approximately 12 pounds to about 50 pounds. They eat 3 different feed recipes, each matching their changing nutritional needs. After 50 days at the nursery, these feeder pigs are now ready to move on to the finishing barn. On a finishing farm, hogs grow to 270 pounds in approximately 24 weeks. As the hogs grow, they are individually monitored. Our contract growers follow a Murphy-Brown best management practice. Every pen, every pig, every day. By tending to each animal on a regular basis, they can tell when an animal feels good and when it doesn't. If an animal appears to be sick, it is moved to a separate pen to receive special attention. If the need arises, animal health products like electrolytes or aspirin can be administered through the animal's drinking water. If it's a more serious problem, a staff veterinarian can be called to diagnose the animal and prescribe treatment. Murphy-Brown staff veterinarians use antibiotics for 3 general purposes: to treat disease, prevent disease, and control disease. All of our products go through very rigorous testing by the Food and Drug Administration before they are actually approved for use in swine. They make sure they are safe for the pig, safe for the food supply, and safe for the environment before they are ever approved. After 24 weeks, at approximately 270 pounds, hogs are ready to go to market. Throughout their life cycle, these hogs have been kept safe, comfortable, and healthy. They are now on their way to provide safe, nutritious sources of protein for families and individuals around the world.
All right, so that was a little bit about Smithfield, the people who provide pork and bacon and sausage. You can find them in almost any store. In fact, Smithfield is the bacon that my dogs love the most. They're big into it. So we're going to go ahead next to our second video called The Matrix. If you don't finish it currently on this one, I know there's a timer on each of these. Don't feel bad. I will have something on. It is posted on Google Classroom. But we're going to go to our next one. Essentially, remember, these videos during this thing is you're actually going to be writing, kind of like jotting down your thoughts on this as the video is playing. So number 2, The Matrix. It's a short animated film by Free Range Studios that works as criticism of big agribusiness.
Here you go, Leo.
Leo,
Who are you? And how did you know my name?
I am Morpheus, and I know a lot about you. Have you heard of the Matrix?
The Matrix?
Do you want to know what it is?
Okay.
The Matrix is all around you here. It is the story we tell ourselves about where meat and animal products come from. This family farm is a fantasy. Take the blue pill and stay here in the fantasy. Take the red pill and I'll show you the truth. Welcome to the real world.
Wow! What is this horrible place?
This is a factory farm, Leo. Places like this are where most eggs, milk, and meat come from.
How did this happen?
I'll show you. In the mid-20th century, greedy agriculture corporations began modifying sustainable family farming to maximize their profits at great cost to both humans and animals. Factory farming was born. Animals are packed as closely together as possible. Most never see sunlight, touch ground, or get fresh air. Many can't even turn around. These cruel conditions cause fights and disease amongst the animals. To fix this, the corporate machine began systematic mutilations, practices such as debeaking chickens. And they started adding a constant dosage of antibiotics to their feed, just to keep these poor wretches alive. This overuse of antibiotics breeds super strains of resistant disease-causing germs. Every day we get closer to an epidemic that cannot be stopped.
Ew! What's that smell?
12 million pounds of excrement. This pollutes the air and groundwater. That's why communities near factory farms often suffer from high levels of related sicknesses.
Well, it smells like shh.
And what's more, factory farming corporations have been destroying communities and mistreating their workers for decades. Since 1950, over 2 million small hog farms have disappeared. If they continue at this rate, there'll be no real independent family farms left. That is the matrix, Lear. The lie we tell ourselves about where our food comes from. But it's not too late. There is a resistance.
Count me in! So how do we stop the boofias?
We are going to spread the word, but it's you, the consumer, who has the real power. Don't support the factory farming machine. There's a world of alternatives. And I'll show you what you can do to escape the matrix.
All right. So go ahead, jot down your information, what you thought about it, and go ahead and submit that. 2, 1. All right, next up. Called Back to the Start. This is a 2-minute commercial and advertisement from Chipotle. And it uses stop motion puppets to tell the story of a farmer who goes from leaving his family farm and going into agribusiness, and then eventually gets kind of disenchanted with it and goes back. So here we go.
I was just guessing at numbers and figures, pulling the puzzles apart. Questions of science, science and progress don't speak as loud as my heart. Nobody said it was easy. It's such a shame for us to part. Nobody said it was easy. No one ever said it would be so hard. I'm going back to the start.
All right. So once again, 2-minute advertisement from Chipotle Mexican Grill uses Willie Nelson's song "The Scientist," and it's stop motion. So really inventive there. All right, next up. This one is a movie trailer for a movie called Food Incorporated. The director is a guy named Robert Kenner, and he's looking some of the problems in the food industry. So while you're watching it, go ahead and write down what you think about it.
The way we eat has changed more in the last 50 years than in the previous 10,000. The modern supermarket has on average 47,000 products. The industry doesn't want you to know the truth about what you're eating, because if you knew, you might not want to eat it. We've never had food companies this powerful in our history.
Everything we've done in modern agriculture is to grow it faster, fatter, bigger, cheaper.
If you can grow a chicken in 49 days, why would you want one you got to grow in 3 months?
When you go through the supermarket, there is an illusion of diversity. So much of our industrial food turns out to be rearrangements of corn.
Sometimes you look at a vegetable and say, okay, well, we can get 2 hamburgers for the same price.
They have managed to make it against the law to criticize their products. There is an effort to make it illegal to publish a photo of any industrial food operation.
I find it incredible that the FDA wants to allow the sale of meat from cloned animals without any labeling.
Peanut butter contaminated with salmonella.
E. coli has been found in spinach, apple juice.
Smells like money to me.
The average consumer does not feel very powerful. It's the exact opposite. When we run an item past the supermarket scanner, we're voting for local or not, organic or not.
Look at the tobacco industry. The battle against tobacco is a perfect model of how an industry's irresponsible behavior can be changed.
Imagine what it would be if, as a national policy, the idea would be to have such nutritionally dense food that people actually felt better, had more energy, and weren't sick as much. Now see, that's a noble goal.
People have got to start demanding good, wholesome food of us, and we'll deliver. I promise
you. All right. So what are your thoughts on this one? Thirty seconds. All right, let's go to our last one. Oh, it's on Edpuzzle. So it's called eTalk, Secrets of Food Marketing. So I'm going to leave you guys here. You'll be able to go ahead into this one with Edpuzzle, do it yourselves. There's a couple of different questions I put on there about what she's talking about with these 3 secrets. So here you go. By the way, she is British, so there is a little bit of an accent. So go ahead and get that one down. All right. So go ahead and get this one done. I'm going to play it on my screen. And I'm going to go into live mode, I think. Yeah, I'm going to do live mode so we can all do this video together. All right, and it's called, let's go to my content. E-Talk, Secret of Food Marketing. There are 4 questions on here. Apparently it won't let me do live because it wants me to choose a specific class, but we can just go and watch it anyway. Here we go.
I'm going to give you some of the secrets about how we make you buy what we want you to buy. So as a marketer, when I'm first giving you a product, what's my job? Well, my job is to make you want it, to crave it, to need it, to think that it is the best innovation in food since sliced bread. But how do we do it? Well, I'm going to give you a really big example later that I'm going to break right down for you. But let's just start by looking at a few fun little things. So here we have Shreddies, an old favourite, been around for years, very popular in the UK and Canada. Without changing a single little thing about that product, they remarketed them, rebranded them as brand new diamond-shaped Shreddies. Food marketing genius right there. In the 1950s, there was a very important innovation in food. The instant mix cake, one of my personal favourites. When they were first brought out, all you needed to do was to add a little bit of water. Who's not going to love that? Well, actually, no one loved it. No one bought the bloody things. So they did a bit of research. And what they found was that the main consumer, the target consumer, the housewife, felt that it was cheating. They didn't want to pass off such an easy thing as their own baking to their partners, their husbands, their families, whatever. So what did the producers have to do? They had to make it harder. So now you had to add water and an egg. And sales exploded. But these are just chicken feed compared to what I really want to talk about tonight, and that is chickens and pigs and cows. So when we think about where chickens, etc., come from, we think about something a bit like that. That's also our instinctive idea. But we all know if we really think about it, if we think about it deeply, it's probably a little bit more like that. But that's a lot nicer. It's a lot more romantic. So how do we give you this impression? Well, there are 3 techniques that we use. The third of which is our secret weapon, and I am going to blow it for you tonight. So please stay primed for that. Let's look at technique number 1. Everybody believes what's on the label. So let's look at some examples. Some of my favourites, some of the ones I use all the time. I'll use Farm Fresh. I'll use 100% natural. I'll use Butcher's Choice. But what does that really actually mean? Well, truthfully, it doesn't mean very much. We see that on the label, we feel a bit more confident. But let's have a look at what a farm really looks like. It probably looks like that. Now, this is a concentrated animal feeding operation. I'm going to run that past you again. It's a concentrated animal feeding operation. That's not going to look great on a label. Hence, we use Farm Fresh. Innovation number 2, this is what we use. We focus on progress. Intensive farming was born out of necessity. At the end of the Second World War, resources were extremely tight. Farming had to be by necessity very, very economical. And we've learned from that and we've built from that. And we were able to now raise more and more animals in smaller and smaller spaces. So we've got extremely good at it. If we looked at a room of about this size, and this were turned into a chicken barn, it's a 100-seat theatre, how many chickens could we probably fit in this room now? I'm going to say about 4,000. It's pretty impressive, isn't it? It'd probably look a little bit like that. Now, the public aren't going to be massively keen on that idea. It's my job to make them feel a little bit better about it. So how do I do it? Well, a basic principle of marketing. We use the right choice of words, and by using the right choice of words, we can make the conversation, we can focus the conversation the way we want it to. So we'll use an example like this. When you look at that picture, where is your eye drawn? It's drawn right to the middle of the page, massive letters, we've got strive to optimize. What we're looking at in the picture, in reverse, looks a bit like that, but this looks a lot nicer, because we're looking at strive to optimize. It makes us feel that there's progress. We feel good. So the challenge for the marketers is to make the public feel comfortable about what they're seeing. One of the side effects of intensive farming, of having so many animals in such a small space, unfortunately, is obviously disease, because you put so many animals into a small space, they're going to get sick. It is no secret that 50% of all the antibiotics in the world are used on farmed animals. So how do you make the public feel okay with this? How does that happen? My job. How do I do it? I use the language of innovation. So we're going back to our old friends at porkcares.org. And what they do is they say, as farming has become more efficient, veterinarians have incorporated new technologies and methods into practice. This makes us feel good. This is positive. Yeah, this is progress. And when we're then marketing to future consumers, we would perhaps use something like this. This is a colouring book, Pigs and Pork. It's absolutely gorgeous. And what we're doing here is we're getting the children to focus on the fact that we're using innovation. So by bringing the pigs out from the muddy fields and into the clean barns, we're taking them away from all that nasty, dirty mud and all the diseases that are lurking there within. Positive. So onto our secret weapon. This is what we really need to focus on. So these two techniques alone, they are not going to work. We need a secret weapon, number 3. It is actually in this room right now. Secret weapon. It is you. So how do we do it? When you're in the supermarket, you don't want to think about where those products have come from. You don't want to think about how those animals have been reared, how they've been treated. The power of willful ignorance cannot be overstated. This is systemized cruelty on a massive scale, and we only get away with it because everyone is prepared to look the other way. Thank you.
All right. So let's go to our last little bit here. Your exit ticket. So once you've done everything else, here's your exit ticket, and that is to do a couple of things. One, define in your own words what sustainable agriculture is and explain at least 2 of its practices. Then I want you to describe some challenges to sustainable agriculture using specific, try to find some specific geographic and agricultural examples of what these challenges are going to be. And lastly, like any industry, agribusiness will never be perfect. However, using these CAFOs, those controlled animal feeding operations, and GMOs, genetically modified organisms, we can feed millions of people every day across the world. So as we're looking towards the future, what should we do? I mean, these things aren't great, but they're getting the job done. So how can we limit their impacts, be more sustainable, and also provide enough food to feed the entire world? So that's what you got. Once again, today is the last day for agriculture. When I broadcast on Wednesday morning, we're going to be looking at the start of cities, because once you get this agriculture growing, the next step up is going to look at cities. In that, one of the things I will post will be kind of a review for agriculture, kind of a mini grade yourself quiz. So you can actually understand, make sure you understand where agriculture comes from, and then we'll see where we go from there. So once again, Wednesday, we're going to look at the start of cities. Once you have this growing population, we're going to tie in the Van Thunen model. We're going to tie in what makes a city, what is urbanization, and what are some things that cities need to do to survive. So does anyone have any questions? Feel free to go ahead and type them in right now. Let me know what your questions are. That's nice. Yes, it is. Anyone else? All right, guys, I'm going to stay broadcasting for just a couple more minutes, and then I'm going to be ending the stream, posting this up on Google Classroom. So if you have anything you need to clarify, anything you need to say, go ahead and get it done now. No? All right, guys, I'm going to go ahead and kill the stream. So I'll see you Wednesday morning. Bye-bye. Stay safe. I'll be leaving this exit ticket open. You can also go to Google Classroom and see the entire Nearpod, everything we've talked about today. So in 5, 4, 3, 2, see you later.